Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, where today I have a lifelong friend from right back at the start of my bodybuilding career. So we're talking probably 8-9 years ago, Chris and I met, and Chris is also an online coach and does some in-person training as well. And it's going to be really interesting to delve into. Basically, we're going to base it on training for your goals, so how you can structure your training plan for your goals, and also we'll touch on, if you've got multiple things that you want to achieve, how you can do that. So thank you first of all for coming on, Chris.
No worries, boy. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Hopefully I can add a bit of value talking about training over the next 45 minutes or hour, or however long we end up talking about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, on every podcast, it goes into different tangents anyway. And of course, with your background of bodybuilding, but you play rugby yourself, and different, avenues that you've been down yourself, and then the clients that you teach and coach, it would be really interesting to go into an array of subjects under the umbrella of training.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm very good at spinning into a new tangent. So, yeah, I'm sure we'll delve into lots of different parts of it.
Yeah, for sure. So how is the rugby going your end? Because you're still doing that, aren't you?
Yeah, so I'm still playing. I'm 34, so I've probably got 1 or 2 more seasons left in me. My kind of history of playing rugby when I was much younger, I kind of thought I'd, like to try and do it at the best level I could. I was lucky enough to play for a team called Henley Hawks, who are kind of basically what you call semi-pro. So it's quite hard to distinguish in terms of rugby, but semi-pro would basically mean you're paid something for playing. Obviously, it's not a full-time job for anyone, but when you play on Saturday, you're getting some sort of financial reward, probably the best way to put it. But yeah, you're getting paid to play. So I played there for a couple of years, and probably made I don't know, maybe sort of 18 appearances, something like that for the first team. And it was great. And then I kind of went to play for a couple other teams. I'm now playing for my local team, Windsor. Myself and my wife, we lived in Windsor. We lived here for 7 years, and it's not at the same level of Henley. It's still a very competitive level. We don't get paid or anything like that. I'm lucky now to be first team captain, and I love it really. It's more rather than when I was younger, where I was kind of doing it to think what level I could play. Now it's more about enjoyment, and the social side of it is massive. So yeah, really enjoying it. But rugby's going okay. We've joined a new league. We're in a London league, so it's been a bit of a tougher start this year. And a lot of sports teams post-COVID, I'm sure people who are listening to this who maybe play recreational sport, COVID just decimated grassroots level sports really, with people kind of not going back into it straight after COVID and looking at doing other things as well. So we've taken a long time to bounce back, but apart from that, it's all going well. It's a good week this week. We had a great win at the weekend, so in a good mood in terms of the rugby at the moment.
Yeah, we've all got that competitive streak, and I know a lot of the listeners will. I mean, it's generally a lot of bodybuilders that listen, but I know that there is definitely avenues that a lot of us take where we try and include different sports and different hobbies. And something like a group sport is something that can be quite appealing when bodybuilding's a very solo endeavor, isn't it? So having a multitude of things that you can do as well with regards to hobbies is definitely something that I think people should consider sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, the way I got into lifting weights before I started out as a PT and as an online coach was the fact that I was playing I was playing rugby at a young age, sorry. And I was that stereotypical slight guy, quite low on confidence, and, enjoyed playing rugby after playing football. When I was like, if I want to get a bit better at this, I'm probably going to have to put on a bit of muscle mass. So got into training in the gym. Probably, I'd hate to be a fly on the wall watching myself train when I was like 18. God knows what I was doing. Then just I got a real love for training in the gym. And, I train in the gym now, not because of rugby, not because it's my job, because I enjoy it. And that's probably what was the segue into going to be, first of all, a face-to-face personal trainer, and then more online. And then now just kind of adding a little bit more face-to-face back in, that competitive element, that time in the gym, and that, being in the gym, training on your own, whether you're a bodybuilder, whether you're doing it for some competitive sport, it's something that's great, physically, but also mentally. And I think that's one thing I've learned a lot from my clients over the last 2-3 years with everything with pandemic, is that the kind of mental side of training, having that hour to yourself is massive as well, which I can see you nodding a lot. It's the same for a lot of people who train. It's not just about the end result, is it? It's also about the kind of journey of training in the gym as well.
Yeah, for sure. This is something I try and labor home to all of my clients and anyone that I speak to. It is the journey. And sometimes we forget it's very easy to, neglect how well you're doing. And you're always striving for more and more and more, especially, bodybuilding and competing. You always want to get leaner, or you want to get bigger, or there's always a drive to push harder. And sometimes you're forgetting, actually, every day I'm pouring in a hell of a lot to this journey.
100%. It's like when someone says like, okay, when so let's look at a lifting example. Oh, when I do a 200 kilo deadlift, I'm going to feel strong. Oh, I'm going to be so happy. But the reality is, when you get to that 200 kilo deadlift, you won't be thinking about that anymore. You're thinking about 220. But actually, when you're there repping out 180 or something, or what it might be, you should be like, oh wow, this is great. And it's the same thing with fat loss and clients. Is that, oh, I'll be really happy when I'm a size whatever. I'll be really happy when I can walk down the beach confidently. The reality is, you get there and it might not feel the way you thought it would do. So you've got to kind of enjoy the changes as you go along. And that when you get to that moment, then you kind of like give yourself a pat on the back, great, and be excited for more. But also, you're exactly right. Enjoy the process as you get there, because in other realms, like people say, oh, I'll be really happy when I earn X amount of grand, and it's like, well, actually, will you? Just enjoy the process of improvement. That's actually the biggest thing to focus on, and then you can still enjoy those moments when you reach those kind of milestone events.
Yeah, and it's like with training, what we're going to talk about today. I think that there's so much merit in, noticing in yourself that actually committing to a training plan is much more than a lot of people are doing in the world. Committing to hitting macros and learning about that is more than a lot of people are committing to. And there's so many different things like that. But when you've been doing it for quite some time, you sort of just do it and you don't really give yourself credit, and you're, always, like we say, striving for that next thing. But there's a lot that goes into physique development and training in itself, even picking up the right technique, dedicating time to that, keeping it regular, all of those things is super, super important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as I say, with a lot of people I work with, it is the majority of people online, but obviously some people, a few people face to face. And yeah, probably one of the slight drawbacks of online training, depending on what your market is and your clientele, is, okay, do they have a really good understanding of technique? Do they know what they're doing? So if I program a deadlift and I'm competent, and because they say they can do it, am I confident that they can do that movement correctly? But now with online training, I use an app called True Coach, which I'm sure there's lots of other coaches out there use it, and I put a lot of time investment into recording demo videos, so clients know exactly what they're doing, how they're doing it, and they can upload training videos as well. But you're exactly right. Sticking to that program, nailing your technique, that in itself, focus on, people always say, focus on the system and the results will take care of themselves.
Yeah, for sure. It's so important to remember just how well you're doing. And like you mentioned earlier, hitting PBs, if you're, like you say, a deadlift, if you're hitting for that and then you get it and you want the next one, also reminding yourself that you've hit, like you say, a mini milestone, and then you can strive for more. But also, as you start to go through PBs and training performance, there is more risk with injuries, there's more recovery needed. And then the journey becomes even deeper and deeper, and there's so much more to consider, which is where we come in to help coach people through that.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the things that I've changed in my philosophy of coaching, not necessarily changed, but one thing I'll always say to a client is that, like, listen, there's no exercise that's 100% essential unless you're a powerlifter. And I don't work with powerlifters. I don't. In my training at the moment, I don't deadlift. I do a form of squatting, yes, but I don't bench press, because those movements for me at the moment aren't right. So yeah, we always kind of look at those three main movements, like the mecca of all movements, and they're great, but for someone, they might not work. So there's, it's got to work for that individual. And yeah, there's no 100% exercise for anyone really. So yeah, technique and longevity is important as well. And I'm sure lots of people who listen to your podcast who are competitive bodybuilders, like, it's something that's probably a sport you can do for a long, long time, and you want to make sure your training can allow that. Whatever level you're going through, there's different levels, aren't there, in terms of competition, going into masters, into longer life. So yeah, your training, you want to be fit and strong for as long as possible.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you actually touched on that. So it's something that I try and, I guess, I don't know what the right word is, but with the compound movement, so like deadlift, squat, bench press, you know, for a lot of bodybuilders, they're maybe not as appropriate because first of all, it's very taxing on the CNS. There's a lot more that goes into these lifts, and like you say, if you're not a power lifter, are they as appropriate? And you know, particularly in diet phases, the injury risk goes up anyway because you're heading into a deficit, and that gets more severe as you go along. And actually bodybuilding, as we know, is an aesthetic based sport where, you know, you really want to stay as injury free as possible, increase your recovery, like I say, especially going deeper into a diet. So are these lifts as appropriate? And I try and give that tuition to clients to build the program so it's suitable for bodybuilding.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously, yeah, my clientele is probably slightly different to yours, but yeah, you're exactly right that, you know, a deadlift, like is that going to build lots of muscle? Like it's going to help, it'll build volume, but you're exactly right. It's very taxing, both, you know, physically, but also mentally as well. The only thing I would say in a caveat to that is that if someone's in a longer period of muscle gain, then, you know, sometimes for some people, gaining muscle can be like watching paint dry. And, you know, one of the most encouraging things can be seeing your numbers build in the gym. So sometimes those bigger compound movements, they can be great in that regard because you can see a tangible result. You can see, okay, I put a bit more weight on the bar there, put a bit more weight on the bar there. But yeah, exactly. Like I don't have, you know, I've tried to think how many clients I've got to do all three of those movements. Probably not a huge amount, to be honest. And particularly when there's a bodybuilding standpoint. But even work, you know, to be fair, although I said my clientele is different to yours, I've got lots of guys who just want to build more muscle mass. Yeah. And in theory, that's bodybuilding, isn't it? Just because they're not going to jump on a stage and get down to that level doesn't mean that we're not going to practice and use strategies that are appropriate for someone who's going to one day wants to be in Olympia, or one day just wants to go on the beach and feel in the best shape of their life.
Yeah, this is another message that I could try and get across. You know, to be a bodybuilder, it doesn't mean you have to step on stage, because when you're committing to the training, nutrition, everything else that goes into physique development, you are building your body. So you don't have to step on stage, like you say. It's about understanding and learning and treating this as a journey. And, you know, you're working on yourself, you're building your body, and everyone has the right to do that, which I think sometimes people can maybe feel a bit daunted by the thought of being a bodybuilder, that you have to jump on stage.
Yeah, I think you can call yourself whatever the hell you want, can't you? Like I would say that I use bodybuilding strategies within my own training, but I don't go around saying I'm a bodybuilder, so to speak. But I totally understand. You're exactly right that in that some people can feel that daunting, and I think if you actually, you know, if I told someone like, yeah, so this morning I had 3 face-to-face clients, all guys ranging from sort of 60 to 70, still wanted to do a bit of training, train with me once a week. And if I told them that a lot of stuff we're doing is bodybuilding practice, they'd be like, yeah, but Chris, I don't want to get too big. It's like, but those exercises and that style of training, the rep range you do, the sets, the rest periods, or whatever it might be, you know, are great for building muscle mass, maintaining muscle mass into longer life. So, you know, everyone in there, most people who step in the gym at some point are going to be doing something that is a style of bodybuilding. And it's just, there's the layer over, isn't it? They're from like a sporting athlete to a gen pop person to someone who wants to stay fit and healthy. And that kind of crosses over from the kind of bodybuilding practices and style of training that you will use. But people just measure it and look to get different things out of their training.
Yeah, because of course measuring it, and we touched on PBs, but there's lots of other things that you can monitor in regards to training where you can see if you're progressing. And of course the different phases that we've said, you know, when you're dieting, when you get to the tail end of a prep, PBs probably aren't going to be occurring because things get a lot harder and you're not facilitating that through your nutrition and, you know, being able to put everything into every single training session, because there's a lot more at play. But there is lots of ways that you can mark progress. It's not just the weight lifted.
Yeah, definitely. It's, you know, as the longer you go into a diet, when you're getting a little bit leaner, it's more about kind of maintenance, isn't it? And, you know, I think most people will go in the gym each week and after, hopefully, at the end of every set, ask themselves, how hard was that? Could I do a little bit more? Could I maintain my form, keep my tempo, so to speak, in a good place with a higher weight? But when you're deeper into a diet, it's more about, okay, if I can keep lifting these dumbbells for the next 6 weeks before I, you know, get to the photo shoot, get on stage, then I'll be pretty damn happy. That will hopefully maintain as much lean muscle mass as possible. So yeah, that's got to be the goal.
Yeah, for sure. And when you have sort of inquiries, as it were, with regards to online training, do you have a way that you work out, obviously everyone's bespoke and everyone's individual, but do you have like a questionnaire that you go through and then you start to build the training?
Yeah, so the way I'll do it, yeah, exactly that. I'll send out some forms to, first of all, we'll have a consultation on the form to get a good idea of where someone's at. But for me, there are main questions I ask. So first of all will be, how many days a week someone can train, on what days, how long they can train. I always sort of say the sort of three main muscle groups that they would like to focus on. Now, some people might not give me three main muscle groups. People might just say certain areas. And while also giving clarity that we'll still look to obviously get improvement on other areas. And then, it's what kind of exercises they enjoy, what exercise they don't enjoy, the access to the equipment at their gym, all this kind of stuff. And I think for me, with more gen pop people than rather than, maybe more competitive bodybuilders, enjoyment is really important, because if someone says to me, Chris, I hate Bulgarian split squats, and I go and program them for them, they'd be like, fuck my life. I know we can swear on here. Because all they'll do, they'll try and get through the sets as quickly as possible. They won't push themselves as hard as they can. And now, yes, within a program, there's always going to be some exercise where you have to take a big, deep breath. You're like, all right, let's get this done. But they might say, oh, actually, I prefer a reverse lunge or I don't know, like a split squat, or it might like a static split squat rather than an elevated split squat. So enjoyment's really important, because if people enjoy their training, they'll push themselves harder, they'll be more consistent. But one of the real things that I'm a bit of a stickler about is what I said at the beginning, is how many sessions a week people can do. Because if someone says to me 3 or 4, they actually mean 3.
Yeah.
So if someone comes to me, they say they can do 3 or 4, they'll probably expect me to program 4. But what will happen is, they'll get 2 weeks into the program, they'll fly through the first 2 weeks, they're probably the first 4 sessions, and then week 3 and 4 they do 3, and then 5 they do 4, then they do 6, and they're like, oh, just keep missing sessions every single week. Rather than if we do 3, their first 6 weeks of their program, they look back at that first 6 weeks and like, I haven't missed a session, brilliant, and they feel so positive, so confident, despite the fact that their training volume is probably slightly lower than doing that kind of mix of 3 and 4.
Yeah.
It's so much about just building confidence, building consistency, and that's the big word, isn't it? Consistency. It's so cliche, it's so boring, but it's so true. And whether it's someone's a Gen Pop client who's just trying to get back on with their training, or whether they're trying to, build as much muscle as possible for their next show, consistency is massive. So yeah, that gives me a good information. But then I always say to clients as well is that, listen, if we need to change anything, we can change it. It's not like there's your program, get on with it, see you later. We won't deviate from this.
Yeah.
It's got to be tweaked. If the volume is too much and they're not recovering, if the sessions are too long, then yeah, you've got to change things.
Yeah, and like you said there about enjoyment, I definitely find that when I work with certain people, if they're maybe transitioning away from a different sport and going into bodybuilding, that they can be married to some of the exercises, especially ones that we've spoke in regards to like deadlifts, bench press, squats. They're like the top 3 movements that historically have been, if you don't do them, you're not going to be progressing. But then it's trying to give that tuition and understanding when we build programs bespoke to someone, to explain exactly why we might gravitate away from certain movements, why we might include movements that they're not 100% sure on, but we can give the tuition and maybe get them to like it a little bit more. Like you say, if they definitely don't like one movement, giving a variation of that, but giving them the understanding as to why that is part of the program.
Yeah, what exactly, and the thing is, like with some of those main movements, those big 3 is that, let's say, like with a back squat, you might say to someone, like, right, we're not going to do back squat on a Monday because we're going to do legs again on a Wednesday or a Thursday. And if we do back squats, like that client might feedback to you that my legs are sore as hell for days and I can't train legs until Friday and Saturday. Well, that automatically, just because you've got this kind of thing about back squats, you're reducing your training volume over the week potentially, because you might even be able to, if someone wants to really bring up their legs, they might even potentially be able to get a 3rd session in over the weekend, a kind of much lower leg volume session. And then, the difference of them saying to you, oh God, Sarah, I got to my leg workout on Thursday and my legs were refreshed and I had a really good session. So you've got that a higher trainer frequency across your across your lower body. And yeah, rather than just having this traditional viewpoint of that's the way it is. And then also as well is that getting, after that, you do your back squats at the beginning of the session, and then you get into exercise 2. Maybe you supplemented back squats out and you do a hack squat or whatever, which is still obviously a very demanding exercise. But actually get to exercise 2 and you're like, oh, great. It's like the stereotypical thing of like, I do chest on Monday, and guys having this whole like, I mean, I got trolled online for a post I put out, which kind of got good traction. It got good traction, and I just talked about how the bro split had to die, and I hope there's no, I want to get trolled from this podcast, but just saying that like, it was all very clickbait saying it had to die, but it was the basis of saying that, listen, for most people, kind of you're doing your bro split might not work for you, because someone goes in on Monday, they do 6 exercises for chest. Yes, they leave with a hell of a chest pump, but as they get to exercise 4 or 5, their chest is fatiguing and the volume is dropping. While those 6 exercises are probably best spread out across the week, across multiple sessions, where you can get better recovery. So yeah, sometimes, I'm sure you do have to challenge people's viewpoints of the way they've done things, and say, listen, what you've done before, I'm not saying it was a bad way to do it, but what we're doing now might be more optimal. And you're exactly right with those 3 main compound movements. For some people, they might not work, but some people might say to you, I just love this exercise, and you're like, okay, well, let's keep it in, let's see how it goes, but again, change it if needed.
Yeah, for sure. And I've definitely found working with clients to come away from the big lifts when we're going more into that aesthetic based, results, and that's their goals. I always try and say to them, give me a chance with this training plan, give it X amount of time. Let's see what happens to your physique. Let's see how you feel. Let's see if you still feel inclined to do, certain movements. But of course, there is also options if you do something like a deadlift to maybe convert over to an RDL, which of course is going to be more posterior chain, but you're still doing a deadlift type movement. Then you can do some leg extensions, like you say, hack squat, things like that. So you can maybe meet in the middle as well. Like you say, it's not just we're not doing that or we are doing that. It's a case of working with your clients to align with their goals and giving your tuition at the same time.
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day. I think the reality is that if someone wants to have a coach, they've got to be willing to be coached. Do you know what I mean? So, because so often that you might see people with amazing physiques, and you then listen to what they say about training, and you're like, God, just don't know any. I'm saying they don't know anything. Don't say not saying they don't know anything. But you might just realize that they've got got very good genetics or whatever, or be very, very gifted in somehow. And yeah, you do have to challenge those people and just sort of say, listen, like, I've worked in the industry for X amount of years. I've got these results. Like, just trust my judgment on this. And the part of coaching as well is, as I say, is that support, is that accountability, but also looking at there's different ways to do things and better ways to do things. So yeah, exactly right. You have to challenge people, but if you feel that you know what you're doing, you've got the results to back it up, then it's a nice feeling when a client, because you're like, oh wow, this really works, this system works, or that my training's feeling better, I'm recovering better, I'm hitting more volume. Like, one of the changes I've probably made with some programs for clients is actually stepping away from programming so many exercises in a session, particularly like a lower session, and the whole thing of less is more. So maybe there's 4 leg exercises in there rather than 5, and then actually like the intensity, the volume is much better. And again, for some people I work with, rather than looking at a session and going, fucking hell, 6-7 exercises, an hour and a half, let's go, rather than just saying it's a little bit shorter. You're going to be in and out in an hour, you get really good intensity, you fly through the program, the session a bit better. There's that balance, isn't it? But again, for the art program as well, that comes down to how many sessions you're doing a week. If you're doing less sessions, then your sessions might need to be longer. If you're doing more sessions, your sessions could be shorter. Just getting that training volume on point.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something I've delved into a bit more. It was back when we first met, it was all about the volume game, wasn't it? Like, you would be in the gym for like 2 hours, sometimes more than that. And actually, I think there's definitely more gravitation towards quality of movements, quality of exercises, and quality of training, and then monitoring your performance and how your physique responds, aligning with that, and being able to really focus in on your sessions and just have that real quality session.
Yeah, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say with training, in terms of training volume, surely your goal should be to get the best results with the lowest amount of volume. to a degree. Just like with nutrition, if someone's in a calorie deficit to begin with, depending on the length of, a fat loss phase or whatever it might be, that to lose body fat on the most amount of calories, like to a degree. And again, depending on, there's so many different caveats to that, isn't there? So yeah, you don't need to be in there for hours on end. And again, I think you've also just got to be mindful that you can't be a robot every single week. There's going to be some weeks your training volume is going to drop back. It's just getting that balance right for you, that you're seeing progress, you're seeing results, you're recovering. And for me, I would rather probably a client, and again, this is with my clientele, but I'm sure people that you work with are the same, particularly long term, are going to benefit from this, that they'd actually spend 5 minutes warming up properly and 5 minutes maybe taking a bit of time to just stretch and do a bit of mobility, rather than focusing to do that extra exercise. Because weights training, we lifting in the gym, we all love it, but the longer you do it, you've got to keep looking after your body. So as I mentioned earlier about longevity, so looking after your body rather than just, and the reality is that the older you do get when you've been training, you might be able to deal with the same amount of training volume that you did when you're younger.
Yeah, for sure. And like you say, it is person dependent, and it's, we're talking generalized. And for some people, increasing volume and that getting quite high and spending longer in the gym can be more appropriate. But when we're talking about, general terms, there's a lot more need for, making sure that your training is effective. And like you touched on there, recovery is something we could talk about as well, because that's something that I've learned over my time as a bodybuilder and coaching, that actually should be prioritized more than I have done in the past. I would have done, like you say, an extra set and then rushed home and then not done anything else to facilitate recovery. And of course, you end up in a bit of a hole, especially in a dieting phase.
Yeah, I mean, recovery. I think recovery is one of those words that is used a lot at the moment. There's a massive, there's always things that are a massive buzz about it. Probably a year ago it was massage guns. Now it's ice baths. I mean, I quite like a bit of cold water therapy. I went swimming in the sea on New Year's Day. So yeah, but yeah, people are always thinking about that next thing of recovery, rather than like, well, don't buy a massage gun if your diet is shit. Like, I mean, your diet is going to be the biggest thing you recover. Getting enough protein every day, spacing those protein feedings throughout the day, getting enough sleep, recovery is really important. And, going back to kind of, training program as well, is that the way I work with clients, like, for those who I feel have got a good level of training, we'll use a kind of RPE system, so rate of perceived exertion, building up the intensity over a kind of 6-week block, and then dropping things back after that. So kind of a kind of deload, so to speak. Because if you're going in there trying to smash it every single week, okay, you can do that longer if you're in a surplus, yes, but you're going to get, I always say, I use the expression stuck. So you're like, why can't I lift any more weight on this exercise? Why is everything sticking where it is? Why are my hips tighter than they were like 2 weeks ago? Why are my knees starting to hurt? It's just these telltale signs that your body is just starting to just creak a little bit. And I always use the analogy of like someone at a desk, someone piling loads of files on their desk to get through, and normally you can just get through it enough and stay on top of your workload. But when you need a deload, it's like people putting too many folders on your desk, and you're like, fuck this shit, I'm leaving the you know what I mean, I'm leaving the company. It's just the same thing. Of that analogy might work, but it might not. I don't know, in my head it works. And that's the thing with recovery, is that you do have to go through these periods of tapering training. And I know people find it very hard, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners will find it hard when I've got to go into the gym today and I can't train to my highest intensity. But, I'm sure lots of them will obviously practice those things already. And for me with clients, if they've got a good level of understanding of training, if I know they know how to push themselves, then periods of lower intensity work to help, recover are, in my opinion, really vital. And I think it also just it helps build that intensity as well, so people can see things building nicely, but then also understanding that their body does need a break from time to time.
Yeah, deloads is definitely something that I find that I need to offer that education into why you would have them. So like you've explained there, why a deload would be situated and the different options around that. So I always say to my clients, and my coach does the same for me, if you still feel compelled to go to the gym in a deload week, then instead of going, say, 4 or 5 times, go 2 or 3, use it as more of a pump session and head towards maybe 60% intensity and just go for enjoyment. Or you've got the option to take a full week off and still do your steps and the other activities that you do towards your physique goals. Or, you know, if you've got the opportunity to, you could go on holiday and then, you know, enjoy it. Don't take your foot off the gas completely, but, you know, still be mindful of hydration, steps, sleep, all of these things, but have some time away from the gym. And actually, a lot of people, when they first do a deload, the feedback is, I didn't realize I needed it that much. And actually, it's almost like brought back, oh, I really want to get to the gym, and you appreciate the gym a little bit more as well.
Yeah, exactly that. You've got to understand that your body just can't take more and more. And then the other thing as well is that people need to understand that unless someone's a professional athlete, that your body's, you know, you always use this expression, your body's only got like one bucket for stress: work stress, family stress, lack of sleep stress. Dieting's a stress, isn't it? Like, your body's getting less calories than it wants, so of course it's going to be stress. Training stress. And when you start to put too much stuff in there, something's going to spill over. You're going to feel it somewhere. So, and you know, that's where sometimes people might go in the gym. Oh, I've had a really long week of work this week. Why is my bench or always seem to go back to these 3 exercises. As an example, why is my lateral raise not as strong as it was last week? So yeah, you've got to understand those periods, and sometimes you can plan them. Sometimes you might need to step in, and again, obviously, that's where, you know, as a coach, you've got to kind of listen to what they're saying and just saying, okay, you're getting a little more tightness, weight's not building up as much, and, you know, starting to feel like not motivated for training as much. And yeah, there's so many different ways you can do it. You can reduce your training effort in the gym. You can reduce your sessions. You can, you know, do whatever. It's just got to be just taking the foot off the gas a little bit. But again, you've got to also know how hard you're training as well, because I'm sure we have these people that say, like, oh yeah, that was a 10 out of 10, and then you're there and you'd be like, you just, you know, you might spot someone who's done 6 more reps. I was like, that wasn't quite a 10, was it? That was like an 8 or a 9. But yeah, other areas of your life are going to have a massive impact on your training, unless you're a lucky individual who can just do it as your full-time hobby, full-time thing.
When it comes to structuring your training plan, when you have clients that, you know, come across things in life, whatever that may be, you know, if something comes up in family life or something comes up at work, all of these things, is there a way that you sort of try and, I guess, facilitate if someone's going to have some time away from the gym? I know this is going to be very person dependent, of course.
So I'm quite lucky with the way that my workouts are designed on the app that I use. If I, you know, so like the conversations I've had with clients last week and this week, like what their intentions might be with training over Christmas, and then what was actually the reality is, I'll say, listen, those sessions that you've missed, I'll take them out. We'll push the program down another 2 weeks. So, you know, say, listen, we're not going to need to catch up. We just, you know, the program that might be 12 weeks is going to be over 14 weeks now because you've missed 2 weeks. And just say that, listen, you know, think about how consistent you've been to this point. Because the first thing that people say when they missed a session, they're like, oh, God, yeah, they feel negative about it. But you've got to bring them back to say, listen, just like it is in nutrition, it's not about what happened this week in isolation. It's about what's happened 90% of the time. That's the most important thing. So, yeah, I'll always just stress to them that I'll change the workouts for you. That the weeks you've missed, we'll do this week and next week, and then we just push the program down a little bit. Or that, you know, maybe pull a training session back. So I was obviously mentioned earlier about making sure it's consistent. You know, I might have someone who's been flying through 4 sessions, absolutely great for 2 training programs, and then something happens. I say, listen, don't worry, we can drop to 3. I can change the training volume up. We can make those 3 sessions slightly longer. So over the week, you're not going to be doing much less training volume than you were with 4 sessions, and you'll feel a little bit better, because there's nothing worse than being stressed to get a workout in for the clients I work with. So yeah, lots of different options, and just making it sure that it's not about what happens in isolation, it's about what happens 90% of the time.
Of course, like you touched on there, being stressed. If you go to the gym stressed with a lack of time and other things on your mind, I found in the past that, you know, that's when my injury risk goes up, and I would maybe tweak something because I'm just not, my head's not in the game. And sometimes actually, you know, you can step away from training, take a step back with the guidance of a coach. Obviously that is ideal because, like you say, you can empower some of them that it's all good. You know, you've been training, this has happened, this is what we're going to do, and give them the tools. But it's trying to think of the bigger picture sometimes. And actually, do you want to go to the gym feeling like shit and have maybe more of a junk workout, or do you want to just step back a little bit, deal with what's going on, and then go back to the gym when you're ready?
I think, it's a really hard balance to strike. And, you know, I suppose the easiest way for me to come at that question is about like how I would feel with training. And I used to be a very emotional trainer. I would get like, I'd feel like I wanted to scream from the rooftop if I ever got a PB. And if I missed a session, I was like, fuck this shit. Like, you know, leave the gym and just stop. Do what your first exercise, like let's say your strength's a little bit low on the first exercise, and then that would be it. The whole session's gone. As opposed to, you know, what I said before we, you know, started recording the training last night, the new program I've been doing for 3 weeks, incline bench, been building that quite nicely. First rugby game of the weekend, went to incline bench. My left shoulder was not feeling happy.
Yeah.
And old Chris would have been like, well, let's just dust this whole session then. Let's get up. And then, you know, I was like, no, right, what's sensible? Okay, I'm sat next to the decline bench. Okay, let's do declining instead. A little bit easier on the shoulders, and actually had a really good workout. Everything else was great. Pulling exercise felt strong, etc. So it's identifying that a change is fine, and actually that a missed session, you know, okay, I'm not going to go to the gym tonight. I've had a really long day. I didn't sleep well last night. I'll get tonight. I'll go home, do stretching for 10, 15 minutes, make myself a good dinner, get an early night, and I'll, you know, go again tomorrow. And just taking kind of that. It's hard because when you enjoy training, you want to kind of enjoy those highs. But I think if you get too high with the highs, you'll get too low with the lows, if that makes sense. So it's just taking that emotional attachment away from it sometimes, and understanding why you're doing this. And also as well is that like, that you're doing it for a hobby. And again, I know, I'm sure you might have clients that you work with or people who listen to podcast who have got some big goals with their competitive bodybuilding, and that's amazing. But I think also as well is, I'm sure a lot of people do it recreationally, as that thing outside of their work. And listen, there's no point getting, there's enough stress going around in life at the moment. God almighty. I mean, you know, when we got rid of the COVID pandemic, we thought we were away with like having a nice, easy life. And now with everything going, other shit going on, it's like, I don't want to add more stress into my life by something that's my thing. I want this to kind of be to take stress away from my life. So I think that's always something I'm mindful of.
Yeah, for sure. And there is a lot of people that are, you know, maybe unhappy in life, and the gym is where they vent their anger, as it were, or their frustrations.
Yeah.
And that's very common. And when you then, you know, maybe address other things in your life and you become a bit happier, the gym can sometimes be almost, you feel like it's too enjoyable because you've gone to the gym and it's like, well, that was really fun. And it's like, I think a bodybuilding mentality, personally, you know, I found that it's like, it shouldn't be fun. It should be really, really hard. And that's something that I'm personally gravitating away from, and actually going to the gym and thinking, that was a really good session. I actually feel really good.
Yeah, it's this whole, it's messaging, isn't it? You see it all over social media that, you know, you've got to grind harder. It's got to be uncomfortable. And that, yes, like, to get a lot out of resistance training, and you have to go back to the basis of what it is that you need to give such intense stimulus to your body to give it a reason to force adaptation. Yeah. So going in there and just, you know, swinging some dumbbells around on a dumbbell curl, your arms aren't going to grow doing that. You know, It's got to be, you know, like, I can't get that weight up. Like, I literally feel like my anterior delt's going to take over, my elbow's going to swing up, you know, and you literally feel like your arms are going to explode. That's going to force adaptation for your arms to grow. So there's a kind of part of it which is going to feel intense and it's going to feel hard, but I think you've got to enjoy it. Yeah, and I suppose it's kind of trying to enjoy those hard periods, isn't it? And, you know, for me, the one thing, again, what I said earlier about being not too emotional training, is that the thing that I always really get out of training is that you know, that thing of doing something that you didn't think you could have done 2-3 years ago. And I'm sure with some of your clients who, like, you'll see their progress pictures, they'll be like, wow. Yeah. Like, when I first started training, I didn't think my shoulders would look like, I didn't think my abs were popping like that. So is that just enjoyment of knowing that when you are consistent and you are hard and you do push yourself hard? I disagree with anything is possible. I disagree with anything is possible. So it depends what level you take that to. But within your training, there's a lot of things that are more possible than you would have thought. So yeah, that's the thing about it, is that I think you've got to strike that balance of enjoyment. It's going to be hard. It's got to be hard because you want to see results. And I'm sure you have clients that you've worked with, both face-to-face and online, and you know that they don't push themselves as hard as they could. And you can keep talking about training intensity. You can keep talking about pushing it harder. But sometimes you have to be like, well, I can't turn up on their door and take them to the gym and just make them train hard. And, without also sounding like too much like a businessman, you also have to realize, like, well, if they're getting something out of it, just because I don't think they're getting as much out of it as I think they could get out of it, then they're still getting something from it. Like, one of the clients I trained this morning, I know he could probably push himself a bit harder, and I do my best to push him as hard as he can, but then I'm like, I look at his age, I look at how fit he is for his age, and I'm like, you know what, for what he wouldn't be doing these sessions if I wasn't here, and he wouldn't be pushing himself anywhere near as hard as I am if he did train. So yeah, that's got to be part of it as well.
Of course. And earlier you mentioned about social media in regards to, what we've just been talking about. I think that sometimes you can look at other athletes, other people, particularly full-time athletes that do this as a job, like you said earlier, and you think, I want to look like them, I want to be like them. But professional athletes that are doing this as a job, their whole day is structured around this. And, you don't know their genetics, you don't know anything really. You only see what's on the gram or wherever you see these types of things, and that can often lead to almost a false sense of what you can potentially achieve in a sport like bodybuilding.
Yeah, it's I mean, I have very mixed views on social media. I mean, I have a massive following, over 1,700 followers, so I'm kind of a big deal on this. No, but like, I think I've lost followers over the last couple of years because I've probably put less work into it, which I know, because someone who works in the online space, is not great. Maybe it's because I've looked at other avenues for bringing in clients, and that's been quite successful. But I am actually going to be upping my game with it. But anyway, I digress. It's a minefield, isn't it? It's a real minefield, and to be honest, it's why I don't actually follow huge amounts of people, because I can find myself on there for ages and ages and ages. And whether you're a competitive bodybuilder looking at another bodybuilder, or an aspiring bodybuilder, or whether you're just someone who's like looking at someone else's life and you think, well, why is that not me? You have no idea of what they've taken to get there, how hard they've worked. You see literally a snippet of their life, and you have to be very, very careful. I remember hearing the expression, comparison is the thief of joy. And in my opinion, it really is, because if you compare yourself, and sometimes a little bit of healthy comparison is good, like, to a degree, if someone's a bodybuilder and they know that in the next show there's someone they'll be competing about, they might want to just keep a little bit of an eye on what they're doing, and that's cool. But as long as it's not a comparison to kind of take something away, it's very hard, isn't it? And you have to be mentally quite strong to not compare yourself, because you're exactly right. You've got no idea on their genetics. You've got no how hard they've trained. You've got no idea if they are an assisted athlete and you're not an assisted athlete. So it's very difficult. I think you just need to kind of stay focused on yourself, stay focused on your own improvement. And if someone else is improving at a faster rate than you, there might not be anything you can do about it. Like, as long as you'll kind of tick as many boxes as you can tick. But that's why I always spin with clients, coming back to training thing, while looking at training videos, I say, listen, if I say you're doing an exercise not as well as you could, don't see it as like, oh God, that's a nightmare. Look at it. Well, that's really exciting, because if I improve this, I could increase my speed of results. But yeah, the social media one is a real tricky one. And I can imagine it must be very tricky with a lot of clients that you work with.
Yeah, for sure. And like you say there, it's something that I've actually been up in the awareness, working with a few individuals in the fitness space about assistance and PED use. You really don't know if someone that you're looking at is assisted, and that's going to make a big difference in regards to training, how they look. And it's a grey area at times, because it's hard. You do look and you go, I'd love to look like that. And I did it when I first started working with Stephen. And I remember the first thing he said back to me was, she's assisted and that's not you. You can't be someone else's physique, but we can tailor your training to work on your goals for something like bigger delts or improving your glutes or, you know, certain muscle groups in certain areas, but we can't make you somebody else.
No, you can't, and you're exactly right. It's a very grey area, and it's something I don't really delve into my clients because, as far as my understanding, I've never worked with a client who has been assisted. And you know, I would never say if a client came on board and they said they were, you know, using something that I would say I won't work with you. I would just say, listen, I don't. Well, no, that's a lie. It's a lie. I have worked with one client before when I was actually working alongside another coach through through the COVID, and I was very clear that I didn't really feel. I said I can't give you any advice on this because I'm not really experienced in this area. And I said, listen, one of the things I said to them was what their goals said. I think you can get a lot from your training by just improving your nutrition, by improving our training. And yeah, in the bodybuilding space, it's a big thing. It's a very great. I mean, we watch. You know, I'm sure you must have watched World's Strongest Man at Christmas. And excuse me, Adis, my wife, comes over and she goes, "So are they all on steroids?" And I'm like, "Fucking damn right they are. They're on everything and everything. Look at the size of the guys. Look how much weight they're moving. Their training volume. Like, you know, you do one of those. They do one event one day and then something in the afternoon and something the next day. Like any other normal individual, they'd be in bed for a week. So, but it's not talked about, isn't it? It's that little thing and." Yeah, it's a can of worms.
Yeah, it's a weird space, but what you just said there is gold in regards to, you know, as coaches and as fitness professionals, there is certain things that are out of our realms, as it were, you know, and I think it's our due diligence to be open and honest and say, well, actually, you know, that's something that I don't feel necessarily comfortable with, or I know someone else that could help you more with X, Y, or Z. And I'm going to speak to them. I'm going to put you in touch with them or whatever route you go down. But we don't have to know everything. And I think it is a sign of a good coach if you can go, actually, that's not my area of expertise. You know, I'm going to seek someone else's help as well.
Yeah, if someone says, I don't know, you'll be like, oh, wow, this person's really trustworthy. Like, there's nothing worse than a bullshitter, is there? When someone's got an opinion on everything. And my always thing is like, you just stay up at night, all night reading or something. Like, how do you know this? Like, yeah, sometimes you have got to be really honest about it and say, I'm not actually quite sure on that, or that's not actually my area of expertise. And yeah, it's, you know, it's a good thing to say. And they'd be like, oh, okay, I don't know about that right now. And I've said this with clients. So, got a long-time client who I've worked with who had her first baby last year, and now it's 3-4 months post-pregnant. So we obviously had to change her training a lot. And you know, when I talked about her training close, I'd done a pre and postnatal course years ago, but you know, again, because I haven't used that before for a while, I had to kind of relearn. I just sort of said to her the training program and said, listen, I don't know right now. I'm going to go away, do some reading, think about what we can do with our training program and do it accordingly. So, you know, read a couple of research papers and yeah, you go away, you learn. And that's the great thing about being a coach is that you're never going to know everything. And any coach who says they do know everything and say, this is the way you're doing, this is the way it works, and others no other way, they're just like, they're not going to be massively trustworthy. And they're probably not going to have your best interest at heart.
Yeah, for sure. And when you mentioned consistency earlier, that's definitely something that we could probably touch on in regards to, you know, actually when you strip things back and when you look at longevity in the sport, which is something else we've spoken about, you know, actually the consistency and the effort you put in over time is where you're going to build a physique, rather than, you know, thinking I'm going to give you this a stab for 16 weeks. It's thinking about the longevity, the adherence, the consistency for any baseline of any training and physique development.
Yeah, it's a boring thing to say when people say consistency. Like, the problem is you'll you know, I'm sure people, you know, get targeted with ads on Instagram, my 10-week course, my 8-week 12 course, my 12-week shred, or whatever it might be, and people can do really well in those things, but then I think they kind of have this idea in their head that beyond that point everything's done and you can just go back to the way you were. It's like, no, actually that's going to be a period of time where you can improve but build new habits to be consistent long term. And yeah, it's a boring thing to say to people, but it's true. That, you know, it's not about, it's about a client earlier, it's not about that week you miss, it's about the weeks that you did show up, get your sessions in, be consistent, adjust your training volume accordingly, whatever it might be, and constantly keep moving things forward. Because I think, so, yeah, people can be kind of unrealistic expectations from time. And, we all work those people who sometimes do achieve amazing results in a short period of time. You're like, wow, like this is intense. Like how they're doing so well. And again, that might come back to the genetic side where they're just very blessed in that regard. But yeah, consistency is what you've got to build. And it's probably more so with nutrition, isn't it? Like, than training. Most people, I think training is always the kind of, I don't know, we're talking about training on this podcast, but training is always the kind of the sexy, like kind of thing of the whole process, which people kind of pin all their focus on that. It's like, well, get the training right, then everything else takes care of itself. I was like, well, you train 5 times, right? Okay, that's a high amount of volume, but that's 5 times a week. Let's say 5 hours a week. How many other hours are in the week?
Yeah,
a lot.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of time where you can screw things up. There's a lot of times where you can, overeat on calories, not move enough, get really tight, not get enough sleep. So actually, sometimes taking the focus away from training a little bit more is just as important, isn't it? Nailing that, nailing the nutrition, good straight. Now, habits, I'm sure most that yourself and myself take for granted is that, God, I hope people haven't kind of hear me slurping on water throughout this podcast, like hydration every day, eating enough protein every day, all those kind of things that we just take for granted. But when you work with a client who maybe is a little bit more, experienced with nutrition, those are the basics that actually they're going to start with, are going to create big wins.
Yeah, for sure. Because also, if you haven't nailed the basics, like you say, sleep, hydration, nutrition, then actually your performance in the gym might be much poorer than it could be. And maybe, if you've been training for quite some time and you haven't got those things in check, you think your training's really good. But then when you start to look at the things like, getting enough sleep, getting the hydration, maybe nutrition, timing, all of those things, training gets so much better. But because you're sort of trying to do it on your own and you're maybe missing the baseline stuff that we've just mentioned, this could be affecting your training massively.
Well, yeah, it's like, I think years ago, when, probably even before as a PT, or maybe early start as a PT, when, you're a bit naive with training, like your Sunday evening, you're sat there like, okay, next week's going on well, I'm going to really boss it and change things. I'm going to write a new training program. And the first thing you do, okay, let's go on bodybuilding.com. We need some new supplements. We need some new pre-workout. You need some whatever. And you go for the jazzy, the sexy thing, where actually the reality, you should be like, you know what, I should plan my breakfast, lunch and dinner for the next 7 days. I should, write this down. And when I go and do a food shop tomorrow, make sure I've got the stuff in my cupboard, so I've got things there, rather than, thinking about like that pre-workout. That's massive. Like, pre-workout can't paper over the cracks. Like, go in there and you start feeling all jittery on a pre-workout, start getting the old itchy and scratchy. I hope people understand what that means. Beta alanine is that, where actually if you've had like one meal in the day and it was pretty crap and you've not drunk enough water, you wonder why you've got a headache. Right? But we see those mistakes, don't we? The most people you'll see walk into a commercial gym are making those kind of like those mistakes, which, they might not know it themselves, but actually it's just, it's not that sexy thing. It's not like that ad that you get for that new training split or that new something. It's just the basics of good fundamental nutrition. That's where you're going to see the biggest changes.
Yeah, you just get so caught up. And I think sometimes there is an element of, when we speak about training, that sort of ego type training where you're like, I'm training really fucking hard. I'm going to war every session I do, which is a term that goes around. And then actually you're not drinking enough water, doing something basic, or you're not including micronutrients. Your protein's not as good as it could be. And all of these little things that are so much bigger than I think sometimes people appreciate when you're in that mindset of how hard you train, and that's everything.
Yeah, it's true, because training is the stimulus, yes, but your nutrition is going to be the building blocks, isn't it? Like, quite literally, protein is the building blocks of muscle mass. It is muscle mass. So you're not consuming enough that, or if you're not consuming enough fruit and vegetables, to maintain good energy, to keep yourself healthy. I mean, Christ, how many clients have you had that have been ill over the last month? I said mine are going down like flies. Like, post COVID, and like we're actually in the winter, so many bugs. Like you keep yourself with a good healthy diet, and you get lots of sleep. You potentially have a stronger immune system to a degree. I'm always mindful of mentioning to my clients once they get to October, say, listen, you probably want to start thinking about vitamin D supplementation because, the weather in England is shit at the best of times throughout the winter. Do not be relying on the 5 minutes of sunshine once a week to get enough vitamin D in. All those things are really important.
Yeah.
And the whole going to war thing, you see that way too much.
It makes me die. I mean, obviously, like you said earlier, you want to have intention when you train, you want to train hard, but there's more to it, and there's more to being consistent over long periods of time than just battering yourself, especially when going into, severe deficits and things that are associated with bodybuilding. You do have to be more mindful. And I definitely, when I worked with Stephen, he used to be like, can you please just slow down and pull back? Because you get into this mindset of you should be in pain all the time. This should be really hard to even live your life if you're a true bodybuilder. And really, there's a lot more going around now that it doesn't need to be like that.
Yeah, and all been through sort of hard periods of dieting, more frequently and harder than myself. But as we talked about earlier, enjoying the process, and people can be like, how can you enjoy a calorie deficit when you're in deep diet? And I totally understand that. But the enjoyment is wake up and oh wow, looking a bit leaner. Or when you're training, you're like, wow, I'm looking pretty vascular. I'm training here. But it's, as I said earlier, it's about doing enough to get results, but not having to go over that, because the other side of it as well is that when progress does slow down, and if you've thrown all your tools at it, you're like, well, fucking hell, what do I do now? Keeping yourself a couple of tools that, so maybe just not going mega low on calories straight away to know that, okay, progress slows down, because everyone adapts differently, don't they? Particularly in a diet. Some people can stay on a certain calorie deficit for 10, 12 weeks and get where they want to. Some people might need to change every 3-4 weeks. They might adapt. They might, they're neat, they're non-exercise activity thermogenesis, their movement will drop back more so than someone else. So if you go at it too hard and thinking, I've got to make this really, really stressful from the beginning, when things do slow down and progress is starting to stall, it's nice to have a few little options to throw at it if you need to.
100%. This is something I work with a lot of people to do, that are on really high output and they're just starting a diet and they're already on, 15 to 20,000 steps. They're already, on quite low food. And it's like, okay, so we're going to look at a prep. Where are our tools? Because we're already on really high expenditure. The food isn't maybe as pushed up as it could be. There's loads of considerations to then, I think it facilitates maybe even enjoying the prep a little bit more, because you can start on higher food. You can start on maybe low expenditure and then eke that over the time. And it makes, I don't want to say easier, because it's not easy to prep, but you've got that period of time where macros can change a little bit less, so your expenditure can creep up, rather than starting like a bag of shit and then thinking, okay, so I've got 16 to 20 week diet here. By the end of it, when you think of where you need to be for show, when you step on stage, you want to be as energetic as possible, which is very hard anyway. But if you've had a gradual diet and then you've had to dig deep for the last bit, you're going to be more refreshed than entering this already on those high volumes.
And this is probably going to open another big can of worms, but the other thing is as well is that if someone's going way too, almost too hard, harder than they need to throughout the diet, first of all, there's the issue where they might lose consistency, all that thing where I'm not going to just track that today because, it's only 150 calories. And then that happens into 2 through 3 thirds and you're eating 500 calories more than you think. And you look at my fitness pal and you're like, oh, it just says I'm eating X amount of calories. And why am I not doing it? And they forget about those two things. And then the other thing as well is that, when someone gets beyond a show or a shoot or whatever, and they've fucking literally driven themselves into the floor, what's going to happen? They're going to rebound big time. They're going to overeat. They're going to put body back, and that's the fucking hard part of it, isn't it? For which I'm sure is probably for you is, and it was probably. I'm sure you must have clients who do their shoot, do their prep, and then get to their finish. They're like, okay, so I've really enjoyed working with you, but I'm going to take a break now. And you're like, we're actually. I think Steve used to do this was like, no, if you're signing up with me, you'll sign up with me for 6 weeks after the show day as well, because that's actually the hardest part. It's easy when you wake up, getting leaner, your weight's dropping, and you're oh, excuse me, and you're making progress. But actually, beyond that point, when you have to mentally realize that you're going to look less lean every week, and you need to, some people might just bump the calories right back up. Some people might drip feed them back up, depending on the individual.
Yeah.
That's the real head fuck.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like it's something I speak about a lot on the podcast because post show it's fucked up. Like especially your first few seasons, I have a lot of first timers listen to the pod. You just don't expect what's going to happen after a show. I always call it like a post show dump where you're like, shit, I'm hungry. I'm allowed in inverted commas to have food. I've got more freedom. The show, the goal has been removed. So suddenly it's like you say, the adaptations with physique, bringing your food up, the lines start to fade, all of these things happen. And it's like, I don't, the thoughts and feelings, I don't know what to do with myself. And also in regards to training, it might be more appropriate that you step away from training for a little bit post show. I know some people do that, start to bring down the intensity a little bit to recover off the back of a prep. And then you bring the intensity back up when you're starting to feel better. There's a lot of consideration there. So it is so true, like Stephen did, you're working with me for at least 6 weeks after, because I think as a coach, it's our due diligence as well to do that.
Definitely. And the thing is as well, you can think, oh, I've got an iron tight, good relationship with food. It's not going to happen to me. And I've a fantastic relationship with food, but I can remember after, wasn't the most recent photo shoot. I mean, I haven't done a photo shoot for a couple of years, and I probably won't be doing one again. And that's not, there's no negative experience about that, but it's just in terms of where I work with my clients now, it's probably just something that's not really needed. But I can remember after a photo shoot, probably the second from last, after I changed, I started working with a coach. I didn't really ever work with a coach for preps or anything like that for photo shoots I've done, and the one time that I did compete. But I started working with a coach because I was going to start back playing rugby. And I remember I texted him in the evening asking if I could have a pizza. It was fucking stupid. Like, I mean, how ridiculous is that? Like, God, just, just ridiculous. Like, and that was where my head was at. And now it's really hard to comprehend, like, how doing something like that rather than being like, I fancy a pizza, like, and go, build my calories up, like, cool, yeah, go for it. Having to ask permission, that it's really hard on the head. And as I say, I think it's also that part of the process, like we talked about earlier, with a goal, not being so fixated on the end goal, understanding it's an evolving process, so that like, oh wow, I did really well on stage, but I'm really excited for this next journey. And then, you've already mentally prepared yourself that you're not going to be as lean as you were, because it's not sustainable. You're going to be increasing your calories, but the benefit of that is, wow, I'm going to train so much better. I'm going to feel like literally, when your iPhone's there on 5-10%, you're on the phone to someone, like, oh my God, my phone's about to run out of battery. Then actually when you're training afterwards, it's like, full goo. You feel energized. You're just like, have I got the right weights here? It's a great feeling. So yes, that you're not getting lean as you were. You're not, chasing the shred, so to speak, without it sounding cliche, but your training just flies up. You feel so much better. You're sleeping so much better. You're more energized. You're speaking at a normal pace rather than talking like a zombie, and then just literally on the sofa, just like, oh, the remote is 3 inches away. It's such a long way away. I don't think I can make it. You actually move like a normal human being rather than going full on zombie mode.
Yeah, and that's something that I always try to remember myself. When you're stepping away from stage condition, at first it's really gritty, like we've spoken about, can be quite a dark place. But then when things return, like training intensity, like you spoke about, you actually get a full night's sleep, all of these things, you go, okay, I did feel pretty shit there. Actually, this is a good goal to focus on, getting healthier again and being able to live life, create memories, rebuild relationships that might have been affected. So many other things to consider when you've been in that tunnel vision for so long.
Yeah. When you put it like that, you're like, why does anyone do bodybuilding? Like, but it's, I remember someone saying to me, again, a guy I played rugby with years ago, and this before I ever did the first photo shoot, he said to me, and I thought it was quite a cool thing. I said, there's a period in your life where you can get in really good shape, and I think you should just fucking do it. And I was like, you know what? That's really true. Like, I was never going to be a competitive bodybuilder. I'm glad I did it once, and I'm glad I've done the photo shoots I've done and got in pretty damn good shape, I'd say. But it's nice to see how you can push your body. But yeah, when you get to the deep end of a diet, you realize that you're pushing it probably a little bit further than it's comfortable. And there's a time period you can do it. And that, yeah, when you come out of a diet and you give yourself more calories, you train a bit harder and you get everything back on track, that you realize, okay, it's, it's good for a period, but it's not sustainable. So yeah, it's understanding. And I think this is the thing that it's always, you've got to be mindful of, that, health has got to be at the forefront, I think, of your training, because, whether you want to keep competitive bodybuilding for years or just keep, I want to be lifting the gym when I'm 80, man. Like I'm not going to be, I want that to be the goal. That, you want to keep yourself as fit and healthy as possible. And that's where through a diet is that, yes, you might look at it as a 12-week thing, or 16 weeks or 20 weeks, but, you've got to be careful you don't build habits that kind of continue beyond that, which are kind of not in your best interest.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where, as we know, working with a coach, and like you said, you had a coach during preps and photo shoot preps. I've always had a coach. It is super important to have someone in your corner that's looking after you to the best of your interest. Prep in itself, it's not the healthiest of things, but with the help of a coach, you can make it as healthy as possible. That's why what I try and explain it to people like my mum. I say, I've got a coach and it's going to be as healthy as it can be for what it is. And then you can sort of, keep a close eye and have someone fight in your corner to make it the best experience as it can be for what a prep is,
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing of a good coach, a good trainer is, yes, they want to be, they want to be experienced. They want to know what they're talking about. But they've got to be there to keep, that form of accountability, but also have, as I say, your best interest at heart. Like, for me, a lot of my online clients, like, I think if I can strike up a good relationship and build a good relationship, then they'll understand that, they're not just a number.
Yeah.
They are someone I'm very driven and interested in, and I want to do well. And if I tell them to do something, it's, with their best interest at heart. And, particularly through something so grueling as, as a prep, like, having someone there, because you mentioned earlier, you can get tunnel vision, can't you? You can be like, I'm not, this area is not looking lean. And then you send a picture to someone, to your coach, and like, well, you're talking about, you're absolutely shredded. You don't probably need to lose any more body fat. And I'm sure we've all heard stories of people who think they're not lean enough, and you're like, are you actually looking at the same person? So yeah.
Yeah, we're so self-critical, unfortunately, especially in physique-based sport. It does uncover
the nature of the beast, isn't it?
Yeah, very different thought processes. And on the note of coaching, before we wrap up, are you taking on clients online, and is that something you're still looking at?
I'm probably taking a couple more online clients. I've got one guy who's actually coming to the end. He's been working with me for, it's been a long time coming. He's been working with me over 2 years actually this month. So I have probably got a available. I work with people on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. So people either have a weekly call with me or a call every other week. That's the way I operate. I used to do I know other coaches work in different ways, and it's whatever works for them. For me, I always just have clients booking for a phone call. Yeah, I'll probably take probably got about these 4 more client spots. Taking, obviously, I said, a few face-to-face clients on. So if anyone's listened to my ramblings today and thought, oh, actually, that might be appropriate for me, then of course, get in touch. But probably got space for a couple more for the next couple of months.
And is the best place Instagram, or where would you?
Yeah, it is. Despite the fact I just flagged off social media for about 20 minutes earlier. No, it is. It's do you know what? It's one of those things that actually throughout COVID, towards the back end of COVID, I was doing work with another coach alongside my own work. I'm now back working myself solely, and quite honestly, I was at a stage where I was probably a bit naive. I had a good client base, and because I was getting provided clients from this other guy, because obviously, from a lot of other people who are listening to this podcast or online coaches, I know it's been a rocky couple of years, hasn't it? But if you're a one-man band or whatever, and I was like, do you know what? Actually, I don't really need to do as much stuff on social media, so I'm just slowly but surely get back into the habit of posting on there. So yeah, find me on Instagram, Chris Emmett Fitness, and that's probably the best place to find me. I hope you like posts of golden retrievers, because a lot of the 70%, 75% of my content is our family golden retriever Darcy. If I'm not thinking of content, I'm like, I'll just post something on there. Like people love dog pictures. I mean, I don't know what your explore page looks like, but mine just seems to be 70% just dogs doing stupid stuff. So,
for sure. So like Chris said, give him a follow on Instagram, or if you're interested in coaching, then give him a DM. But thank you for your time today. We did, of course, go on lots of different tangents, which is what the podcast is about.
I told you it would. I told you I'd spin it down many different tangents. But no, it's been really good to chat with Sarah. It's been nice to talk about, I don't talk a lot about kind of preps and stuff like that with the clients I work with. And I'm so happy that I did compete that one time, and the shoots I've done, and it's amazing to learn about yourself and what you can do, what you can achieve physically. But for anyone who's listening who is a bit more first time to it, or less experienced, is that it is really important to kind of probably heed some of the things we've talked about. With your training, do enough of what you need to, but don't always feel like you need to overdo it. Be consistent with your approach and realize there's not a one size fits all for everyone. And be focused on those big things, those nutrition, your hydration, your sleep, your training performance. Don't be drawn to the magic thing you think is going to be the difference. That, I need that massage going, I need that, that pre-workout, that's going to be the difference. It's really not. It's going to be, if you're doing everything else, great, add those small little 1%ers in, but focus on the big picture and you'll do pretty damn well.
Yeah, and of course, enjoy the process.
Enjoy the process, very key. Easy for us to say here, just sat on the sofa, just having a chat about it. But it is true. Set yourself goals, do your best to work towards those goals. That gives you something to work towards. But don't be so fixated on that goal that anything afterwards is like, well, now what? And enjoy the journey as you get there. So enjoyment, I think, is got to be a big part of it. Maybe not enjoyment when it's 5 o'clock in the evening and you're calories for a day. You're like, I better go to bed now.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you again, mate. It's been awesome.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure, Sarah.
I'll speak to you soon.